Standing By, the Terry and Ted podcast, is sponsored by the UPS Store Canada.
Okay. Well, we have to practice parce que votre français, c'est une catastrophe.
La bibliothèque, c'est moi.
That's Ted's. We should explain that's your opening line. When you
Yeah.
don't do bonjour, hi, you do.
Bonjour, mon français est une catastrophe.
That's a good
I
opener.
grew up in Brossard as the only English kid on my hockey team most years, and my nickname was Le Grand Bloke.
Okay, we're going to get our guest introduced here in just a second, and we're going to get him to move closer to the microphone. That's what you want, eh, Poseidon? I nearly said good morning. I'm Terry DeMonte. Old habits die hard.
Well, people could be watching it in the morning.
That's good. Well,
It's
then
the great
good
thing
morning.
about the podcast.
There
You
you
can watch
go.
it any old time.
That's right. Maybe watch it at 7:47. I'll do my thing.
There you go.
I'm Terry DeMonte. That's Ted Bird. And it's season 7 of the Standing By podcast. Once again, brought to you by our good friends at the UPS Store Canada. The UPS Store Canada is all over the place, as they say. There are over 380 locations all across the country. I've been talking about particular locations that I'm familiar with. There's one not far from my house on Fraser Highway in Langley. I used to live really close to one in the northwest quarter of Calgary at the Crowfoot Mall. There's a nice location there. There's a nice location in River Heights in Winnipeg.
There's got to be at least one in Fredericton.
I'm sure there is in Fredericton.
Fredericton.
Fredericton. You need marbles for that?
No, you just need to be from there.
Okay.
Fredericton.
They're everywhere,
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to tell you. And the UPS store, when you see the logo, you think the truck. Yes, but the UPS store itself will help you with things like a different address. You want to run your business from your house and get a mailbox, they can help you with that. You need to ship something fragile, they'll help you with that. Got some things you need some boxes for. If you're moving, they'll help you with that.
Want to send an empty cookie tin to your mom in Fredericton?
Yep. They help
Take
Ted
care
with
of
that.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas, Mom.
I'll never live that down as long as I live. I thought the cookies would be stale.
The Felix and Norton cookie
Yeah,
tin.
Terry and Ted, Felix and Norton cookie tin, and I didn't put any cookies in because I thought, well, they'll be stale by the time they get there.
So if you want to send your mother an empty box of something,
Don't.
the UPS store can help you with that too. They really are terrific. If you run a small business, you know what we're talking about because the people that run the UPS stores are entrepreneurs themselves. They're running their own small business, so they can really, really help you out. Find the location near you online at the upsstore.ca. And just before we introduce Stu, I want to say thanks to Paul and the good folks at the Fairfield Inn and Suites in Dorval. Great spot if you've got to catch a late flight, early morning flight. You're transferring, you're coming, you've got to catch. It's a very convenient place.
Clean,
Yeah.
free breakfast.
Lovely people.
They'll even let your friend
That's right.
from Point Clear come and enjoy the free breakfast.
You actually got the green light from the
I
boss
did,
on
yeah,
that,
I did,
eh?
yeah.
Go
Help
ahead.
yourself. There you go.
Thanks to them for their travel assistance because I come in from the West Coast. Let's introduce our
Would you like me to?
Yes.
Stu Cowan is a sports columnist for the Montreal Gazette, and Stu's been writing for the Gazette for, let me guess, Stu, I would say at least 35 years.
I actually had hair when I started, a lot of hair. So it's closer to 40 years now.
It is,
yeah,
eh?
Wow.
Yeah. Well, not just writing. I've done just about every
Yeah,
job in the
yeah.
sports department, but I've been in the sports department for about 40 years.
Stu also set up the very last goal I ever scored in a pickup hockey game. It was 1986, Point Clear Arena, a bunch of media
Yeah, I remember
guys
those.
playing pickup, and it was a give and go. I passed the puck to Stu at the blue line, and I just skated towards the net, not really knowing where I was going, why I was going there, or what I was doing. And the next thing I know, he's put the puck right back on my stick, and I deflected it into
Tape
the
to
net.
tape?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it was
Great. Yep.
it was beautiful. And I thought, Jesus, he's a good hockey player. He actually knows what he's doing. And he looks like he can still play.
I was going to say,
Those were fun days back then.
Those were
Point Claire
fun days,
Arena,
yeah.
10 in the morning till
Yeah.
11:30. All the guys, media guys who used
Media
to work
guys,
nights.
10 in the
guys
morning
who all
during
work-
the week.
The guys who work nights, and then we'd go to the
Yeah.
Hymas Tavern afterwards,
That's
have
right,
a
yeah.
couple of beers and a bite like to eat. They were
Randy
great. Randy
Tiemann, God
Tiemann,
rest his soul.
Ron
Yeah,
Francis,
was always there. Yeah.
and Randy from that group ended up organizing the CTV or CFCF No Stars, and we ended up playing in a tournament every year in Lake Placid for years. It was, it was a lot of fun. So I was rest in peace, Randy, one of the nicest guys I ever met in my life.
Man, you ain't whistling.
Oh, yeah.
I'm telling you. And it's an inside joke. I know it's not whistling.
The whistling disky.
Yeah. People say whistling. It's Dixie, isn't it? Yeah, not with me and Ted. How tall are you, Stu?
I'm 6'4".
Yeah, it's 6'4". And did you play a lot of sports?
I played a lot growing up.
Hey,
I played baseball was my favorite sport.
Yeah.
And hockey.
I was going to say you look like a pitcher. Were you a pitcher?
I was. My dream as a kid was to pitch for the Boston Red Sox.
Really, eh?
Yeah, that was my dream. That was
And
baseball was my the sport I was the best at. was
Right-hander?
baseball. Right-hander.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But and growing up, I was a huge Expos fan. Rusty Staub was my first sports hero. But as a kid, we used to get those Red Sox games on TV all the time, right? And I always thought Fenway Park was so cool.
Yeah.
And it is.
And it still is. And, I wanted to pitch for the Boston Red Sox.
Me
I remember
growing up in New
Jerry Park.
Brunswick.
Yeah, Jerry Park. First bank account I ever opened was Bank of Montreal through the Rusty Staub fan club. You got your little card, and your little card entitled you to 50-cent bleacher seats at Jerry Park.
Channel 22, the Red Sox games?
That's right, yeah.
Because I remember when I moved to Montreal in 79, and I was a big Red Sox fan from growing up in New Brunswick, and those were the games we'd get down east. You'd get the Red Sox on WAGM, Presque Isle, Maine. And I became a huge Red Sox fan. Yeah, Yaz was my guy.
Louis Tion trying to imitate his pitching wind
of course.
up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Carlton Fisk, I remember watching the game on TV with him waving the ball fair.
1975 World Series Game 6.
Baseball was my favorite sport as a kid. I loved it.
Yeah, you know what? The Red Sox lost that World Series, but history almost dictates that they won that World Series because of that game. Like, that was such a celebrated moment. Carlton Fisk waving that ball fair in extra innings, and the Red Sox stave off elimination and win Game 6 to force Game 7, which the Reds won. Cincinnati won Game 7 and won the World Series. And Johnny Bench has always had a big resentment about that. Yeah, Johnny Bench has always said, does anyone know that we won that World Series?
But baseball was, the Oakland A's, I love the Oakland A's. Yep. Vida Blue was like the coolest guy alive, and all those teams, the Red Sox and the Mets and Tom Seaver. It was the glory days of baseball, and the games lasted 2.5 hours without a pitch clock. It was just it had a flow to it. But as I said, I got turned off of baseball a bit, the Expos leaving, and also the games. Who wants to watch a 4.5-hour game?
Yeah.
But in the last year with the pitch clock, I probably watched more baseball last year on TV than I'd watched in 20 years.
Do you still play sports, Stu? Because you're in incredible shape.
I still play old-timers hockey, not as much as I used to. We used to have a group of guys. We played at LCC every Monday night for about 30 years, and then LCC needed the ice time for the school, so we got booted out of there.
LCC, they had good ice.
The old rink.
We
started at the old outdoor rink. The outdoor rink was amazing.
When I refereed high school hockey, we used to dread and love the assignment because you'd freeze your arse, but there was no better rink to skate on.
Well, I played high school hockey at Centennial on the South Shore.
Did you?
And it was similar to the LCC rink. It was sort of they had a barn built around it. But
what year did you play high school hockey?
I graduated in 1980, so I played from like 76 to
1980. That was before I was ref in high school
Steve
hockey.
Mitchell, whose son Tori later played for the Canadians, was my coach in high school. So I played the best ice. Chicken wire, we had to play. You'd come over the red line. I played defense. You'd fire it off the chicken wires because it wasn't glass. As a goalie, never knew where the hell it was going to go. So it was.
Is it Father McDonald rink at John Abbott that's also well known
for
having?
barn. There's a few of them. There's one at there's that one. There was one at Stansted College. I was fortunate. I got to go to Howie Meeker Hockey School a couple of times when I was a kid.
As well?
Yeah. A little Stansted
so
College.
anything that's cold is going to have good ice.
Anything that's cold is going to have good ice. That's basically
the LCC rink. When I was reffing I was just in high school and I was reffing high school hockey. You used to have a tarp. It was just a tarp, and if the wind was blowing that day. Oh, Christ, was it cold.
And they had a tin roof, and the pigeons would poop on the ice.
And I couldn't run to the ref.
LCC couldn't afford to build a real rink?
Well, they eventually could, but in the day, and it was. We got good news and bad news. The good news is you're going to skate on the best, hardest, and as a ref, you get to go on the ice first, right? The Zamboni has just gone off, and we used to love it. Those first dozen strides on that rink were amazing. Yeah. But by the end of the first period, I couldn't wait to get back into the ref room. Your fingers were all frozen and your toes were all frozen. It was the price you paid to play at that.
Well, when I played
that
there
rink.
as old timers, and we were still playing at the old rink before the new rink was built. I mean, there's nights you go to get a drink of water, and it was frozen.
Yeah,
the water bottle was frozen. There was a night I remember a guy took a shot, hit the post, the puck split in half. I remember guys. I remember one of my buddies being in the shower after the game. We heard him screaming bloody murder. We didn't know what was going on. He had frostbite on his toes, and I guess when the hot water hit his toes.
But, I know that pain, that toe pain.
Yeah.
When your toes are frozen and you don't realize
and then the hot
it.
water hits it.
Yeah. Or if as a kid, you'd go into the shack at the outdoor rink and you'd take your skate off and you'd go, "Oh, I think what the."
Exactly.
That's some kind of crazy pain.
Uniquely Canadian
Very
moments.
Canadian pain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are things at the rink that are experiences at the rink that are uniquely Canadian. One of them that a couple of them I always think of is the sound of a puck hitting the goalpost. Any Canadian will tell you what that is.
Yeah.
Without having to see what has just transpired.
And the other one is if you're walking through Westmount or NDG on a brutally cold night, and off in the distance you can hear the puck hitting the boards. Yeah. And I can't do the imitation of the sound, but if you live in Montreal or you're a Canadian, you know the sound of a cold winter's night with the puck being bounced off the wooden boards in the distance. It's a very unique.
And the skating stride outside. I remember we were playing LCC one time. It was during one of the NHL lockouts, I guess, and Gord Donnelly, NDG boy, played in the NHL. More of a tough guy than a real player, but he came out to play. And I remember the puck went in the corner, and I went to get it, and I hear this sound behind me. Oh, what the hell is that?
It's like a train
and it's
coming.
Gord Donnelly. So I always tell people, people who think like the fourth line guy in the NHL, he's not that good. He's good.
Yeah.
Every guy playing in the NHL is a good.
Is that where I hear that guy hears footsteps comes from?
Well, you just hear
it coming.
it's a different sound. And the only other similar, I remember we played a media game against NHL old timers at Verdun Auditorium years ago, and Gilbert Perreault was on the team, and it's that same sound. And at the time, Gilbert, a little bit heavier than he was when he played, but that sound of the skates.
Yeah, it's funny.
Chopping up the ice.
They never lose the stride.
No, they don't. They don't, and they never lose the vision and
talk about the fourth liners. I remember someone saying once years ago, and it really stuck with me. They said you have to remember the worst hockey player in the NHL, generally speaking, is still the best player his neighborhood has ever seen.
Exactly. Well, we all grew up playing hockey or watching hockey. We all remember the kids. He's going to make it. This guy's amazing. He's incredible. Yeah. No, they don't. So there's more that don't than do.
The other uniquely Canadian thing that I wanted to mention was the smell of unwashed hockey equipment that hasn't been unpacked from the previous game. You ever play with those guys who show up and they haven't unpacked their equipment from the last game?
Yes.
Almost like your tuna.
Well, during my single days, I lived with two buddies of mine, John LeBerge, who worked for CTV for years, and Pete Harrison. And Pete was a goalie. And we rented this place on St. Antoine Street. It was 2 floors. It was huge, like a 9.5 place. It was awesome. But we had one room.
$400 a month.
We had one room. We had one room for the hockey equipment. And that's back when there were the old leather pads. Right, We'd play the Monday night LCC, put the equipment in there, leave it, close the door, and then you'd go in a few days later to get your stuff. I was like, whoa, okay, that's special. That's special. I wonder how the person after we left, I don't think that smell's probably still there.
Stu, did you always want to be a writer?
Well, as I said earlier, I wanted to be a professional athlete.
Yeah.
My dream was to pitch for the Boston Red Sox. I also dreamed of playing in the NHL. Bobby Orr was my favorite player.
Did you get close on either count?
No, I didn't. Baseball back then wasn't like it is now. Like it's sort of, they didn't have, I played the inner city level baseball, but it wasn't like they didn't have the ABC program they have now and stuff like that. Right. It almost didn't seem possible as a Montreal or even a Canadian to play in the major leagues. It didn't seem like a real dream.
What did the radar gun say?
Oh, we didn't have it back then.
No,
but I could throw a wicked curveball.
You could.
I read a book by Bill Stoneman, former Expos pitcher, and it taught me how to throw a curveball. Yeah. And I was a right-hander, so I could throw it right at the right-handed hitters who would duck, and
they would bail out,
and it would come over. But I could throw.
I was going to say,
decent velocity.
With your physique, I would imagine back then you had the same kind of height and same kind of.
I was skinnier.
Oh, were you?
I was built like Peter Svoboda probably when I was 16, 17, about 6'2", 170 pounds maybe. Filled out later. But in hockey, I played high school hockey, as I mentioned. I played midget AA is probably the highest competitive level, some junior B. But as Steve Mitchell, as I mentioned, my high school coach, he said, Tommy, he says, Stu, you couldn't pivot. You weren't the best guy pivoting on defense, but if the guy got by you, man, you could deliver a good slash. So that might sum up my hockey career.
Shout out to Steve Mitchell. It was, when you referee, and you're part of a gang of referees in high school hockey, it was like a small team of officials, and you pick your favorites, Steve Mitchell was a real very respectful, very knowledgeable. As a young official, he treated us with.
He left Centennial and went to Selwyn House.
Yeah,
and he ran the athletic department at Selwyn House for years and years.
Because there was a big rivalry between Selwyn House and Loyola, and Selwyn House and LCC, and those games were always, that there was some pretty intense, high level of play in those days, because a lot of the kids that played AA hockey were also able to play high school hockey.
Yeah, he was a great coach. I'm still keeping in touch with him. A great guy. He's still in Greenfield Park.
Knowledgeable hockey.
And it was really cool when his son Tori ended up with the Canadians.
Yeah,
I've
very,
known Tori
very
since
cool
he was a
story.
kid. And I remember the day when he got traded to the Canadians. That was pretty cool too. So short boy.
So when do you think, okay, the Red Sox probably not going to get drafted by the National Hockey League? Do you decide then there's something else I want to do?
Yeah, well, I had in my high school annual, my graduation book, I wrote my ambition would basically be a journalist, sports journalist. My dad worked at the Gazette. He was a typographer back in the years when they used to have the linotype machines and all that stuff. And he worked the night shift. So there's times I would go meet him at the Gazette, the old Gazette building, the old one down on St. Antoine Street, to go for dinner or whatever. And while I was waiting for him, he would bring me to the sports department. I'd hang out in the sports department. And like Tim Burke was there at the time. And I thought it was like the coolest place ever. Yeah. Like I was 13 or 12 and talking sports with all these guys that I would read in the Gazette. And I thought, this is really cool.
The old school newsroom that was
everybody's smoking,
and
smoking and everything else. But as a young kid, I just thought it was the coolest thing. And so I figured I wasn't a good enough athlete to be a pro athlete, and the next best thing would be the cover sports. And I was very fortunate that I got the opportunity to do that, and I'm still doing it. And it's mainly because of Red Fisher, who was willing to take a chance on a young kid and give me an opportunity. My first job was doing the old scoreboard page, the stats page. Yeah. And wow. And that's
so you got right in. You didn't do journalism.
No. What happened? So I got a summer job as a copy boy, they called it at the time. Yeah. When I was in it's the summer between grade 9 and 10 or 10 and 11, and basically you were a gopher. I was looking for a job. My dad said to me, do you want to see if they're looking for copy boys? They're usually looking for people in the summer because the regular guys go on vacation. So I got my foot in the door like that. And again, I hung around the sports department a lot. I got to know the guys in sports, and Red was a sports editor at the time. And I became really good friends with a guy named Dave Carter, who also lived on the South Shore. He used to do Carter's Choice, the Blue Bonnets days, if you remember that, the picks and that. And him and I became friends. We used to golf together in the summer because we didn't go into work until our shift started like 6 o'clock at night. So we'd golf in the day and then go to work. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I went to graduate high school. I went to CJEP at Champlain College. And I was going to CJEP. So I'd do the copy boy job in the summer, and then I'd do it weekends sometimes during when I was going to school. And at that time, the paper was really starting to get into the computerized version of it. And the guy at the time who was doing the scoreboard page for the Gazette, Tim Simpson, who sadly passed away a few years ago.
I knew Tim.
Yeah, well,
nice
Tim,
guy.
Nicest guy in the world, biggest Detroit Tigers fan who ever lived.
Yeah.
So he was doing the scoreboard page, but he was ahead of his time in the computer stuff. So they wanted to pull him out of sports to have him teach computers literacy to the newspaper guys who were used to banging it out on the typewriters. So they were left with a spot. They needed somebody to start doing the scoreboard page. And Red asked Dave Carter if he knew anybody. And he said, well, I know a kid who I think would be perfect for it. And Red sort of knew me a little bit, but Red didn't talk to rookie players on the Habs, so he certainly wasn't going to talk to. He wasn't going to talk to.
I was going to ask you, was he
talk to the copy boy?
If he talked to me, it was go get me a coffee or
was
something.
Was he intimidating, Stu?
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. I only met him once, and he was very kind. He was very nice, but it was much later in his life. But when you read about him, the guy's a legend in this town. But a lot of people are grateful to him, like you. Mm-hmm. But when you read about him, you get the impression that he was like
he commanded respect.
He commanded respect,
not demanded.
No.
Commanded.
But I think I get the impression he'd be like, "Get out of here, kid."
But crusty, but a heart of gold.
Yes,
no?
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Once you get to know him,
Yeah.
And so Dave went to Red and said, "I have a kid." So I get an interview with Red. So imagine I'm 18 at the time or whatever, and I'm going into Red's office, and I walked in and closed the door. You know the way Red talk. I sit down, and he says, "Do you know why you're here?" And I went, "I think so. I've heard some good things about you." Well, thank you, Mr. Fisher. He says, "Are you interested in this job?" I said, "Very much." He says, "You're not going to let me down if I give it to you?" I said, "I won't." He asked me a few other questions. I don't remember everything. I was so nervous. I was probably sweating. And then he said, "Okay, I'll get back in touch with you." Okay, so then I can't remember if it was the next day or whatever. I got a call, and it wasn't from Red. It was from the secretary or whatever saying, "You got the job." So that's how I got my foot in the door. So for the first year, I worked full-time doing the scoreboard page. So it was like 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift after the last games. And then I got up in the morning and went to Champlain College to finish CJEP.
That scoreboard page, just looking at it gave me a headache.
And on Mondays, it was 2 full pages.
How did you lay that?
And it was before MLB.com or NHL.com. You had to update the standings by yourself. You had to update all the Expo batting averages by yourself.
Oh, my God.
And on the deadline, on the newspaper deadline. So it was a great training ground.
Full-time job.
Full-time job. Yeah. And it was a great training ground how to handle deadlines, which is so important in the newspaper business. It's one thing to be able to write. It's another thing to be able to write quick. People don't realize with newspaper deadlines, they've changed over the years, but back in the day, we had 3 nightly deadlines. It was like a 10 p.m. deadline, 11:15 deadline, and then 2 a.m. deadline. So a Canadiens game would end at 10:15. Your story had to be in at 10:20.
I'd be like,
well, that's why, if you're in the press box at the Canadiens game, especially back then, the third period, the writers are all, you're sort of watching the game with one eye and looking at the other eye. So, but the scoreboard page was an amazing way to learn how to work under deadline pressure.
And you had to be careful not to put Rusty Staub average 257 and it was 259.
Exactly.
Someone would have your ass in a sling.
Or the biggest fear when Red Fisher was sports editor, if you walked in and each person had their mail slot, and if you saw a copy of a page in there with a big red circle and "See Me RF."
Oh Christ!
It was like, oh my God. So I don't know. A few months into the job, it was probably a Sunday. Seasons were changing. Like right around now, you had baseball starting, hockey going, football. Everything's going on at the same time. So on the score lines, on top of I think it was the baseball summaries, I had put hockey team names or vice versa. So instead of having like the New York Mets, I had Rangers. Instead of and I did it for I don't know how many of the scorers, like a lot of them. So I get in the next morning and I see the thing and I see all these circles and I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna get fired. Like I'm gonna get fired. So I walk in, see Red, and again close the door. I sit down and he goes, "What happened?" He might have said, something happened. And I said, Mr. Fisher, I proofread it. I don't know. I guess with the seasons all changing, I had a brain cramp or something. I really don't know. Like it wasn't for lack of effort. I screwed up. I said, I'm really sorry. I really screwed up. If it happens again, I might have second thoughts about hiring you. I sat there waiting to see if he was going to say anything else, and then he said, "Get out." And
did you need a safe space?
No, I didn't need a safe space. But what's really funny is years later, I became sports editor. Yeah. And Red was still there, so I was Red's boss. Yeah. Although Red more or less did his own thing. Yeah. And every once in a while, Red would stick his head in my office and say, "Remember who hired you, kid." And I think he took pride in that. The thing I learned from him, though. He didn't yell and scream at me or anything. No. He just made it very clear. If you screw up like that again, I'll probably be looking for someone. And I remember that when I became a boss later on, or just in regular dealings in life, you can send a much stronger message just by being firm without screaming and yelling at people. And he was very firm and very, he made it clear if this happens again, you're...
Knowing your respect for him and your passion for sports and for sports writing and having, being grateful for the opportunity, you probably didn't want to disappoint him.
Exactly. You did not want to disappoint Red. That's exactly true. You didn't want to let him down. You really didn't want to let him down. As Ted was saying, he could be a crusty curmudgeon type guy, but years later, when I was sports editor near the end of Red's time at the Gazette before he left, we had great conversations together. He'd come in my office and we'd talk, and he was an interesting guy.
Living history.
he
like
was
a living, breathing history.
Yeah.
He was like he was. There'll never be another Red. I mean, there'll never be another guy. It was a different time. That's back when they traveled with the players.
Yeah.
There wasn't 50 guys covering the Canadians like there are now. There was a handful of guys. Red knew more about what was going on in the Canadians than the GMs did a lot of times because the players would talk to him. The players trusted him. He knew what was going on the ice, what was going off the ice. The players knew they could trust him. They knew if they talked about something personal with him and he said it was off the record, it was off the record. I mean, Red had a lot of rules. One of them is I don't deal in rumors. I remember when there was a report, this is when I was sports editor, and there was a report, I think it was on TSN website, that Pat Burns was dead. I don't know if you guys remember this. It was, and Pat Burns wasn't dead.
Yeah.
And so I called Red at home and I said, Red, I'm just want to let you know, I just saw a thing on, I'm pretty sure it was TSN, on the website saying that Pat Burns had passed away. I'll check. 5 minutes later, phone rings. Stu, it's Red. Pat Burns is doing groceries at the IJ in Magog. Is that good enough? And I just hung up the phone. That was it. Pat Burns isn't that. So he didn't suffer fools, Red.
No.
And but he respected people who worked hard.
I remember reading him as a kid. I was an avid hockey fan, and my father always came home with the Star. And I would grab it off him at the end of the day. And I remember reading him as a kid, and I remember a number of occasions thinking, well, how would he know that?
Yeah.
He would have some nugget about something that was going on, and I think, that's interesting. I wonder why he knows
He had the scoop on Guy Lafleur retaring.
Yeah.
Front page story of the Gazette. Everybody
Yeah.
was making fun of him that day in the media. This is a joke. There's no way Guy Lafleur's retiring. He got it. He got it from,
Stu,
I've learned so many. I was so fortunate when I first started the Gazette because Red Fisher was there and Michael Farber was there. Like, you can't have two better mentors in this business than those two guys. And I learned so many. And the Reds thing that I've never forgotten is criticize but be fair. Like, your job, especially as a columnist, your job is to criticize when people aren't playing well, but also be fair. And I think a lot of, in today's media, that's been lost. A lot of people are over the top, especially Twitter and social media.
Well, this is what I wanted to ask you about the. I know the eras have changed. I know things are different at newspapers, and newspapers are struggling a lot. But what do you think the effect has been on the business of sports reporting that these guys, the cigarette smoking, crusty, old school, there was not just an appeal to those guys, but they were very, very effective, and it was writing at another level. What's been the effect that these guys are by and large lost, and they're being, a lot of it is being replaced by Al on Twitter, who calls himself a hockey journalist. No, you're not.
Anybody can have a blog now, right?
Yeah,
Anybody can have a Twitter account, and everybody.
An example is the guy in Toronto, Steve Dangle. Is that what they call him? Now, I don't know much about him, but I know that he's huge. Like, he's got hundreds of thousands of followers, and he's not a professional journalist, but he has a lot of currency among hockey fans. Everyone wants to know what Steve Dangle has to say.
Is it because people don't know that style of writing and that?
I think people like the sort of wild takes now, right?
Okay.
They like the sort of outrageous. You look at some of the podcasts, the big podcasts in the States, Rogan and these guys are sort of, they're outrageous in some ways.
Would Spit and Chicklets be the hockey version?
Yes, it was.
That?
Yeah, that's right. It's I don't know if outrageous is the right word, but it's they're not afraid to do stuff.
They're certainly opinionated.
There's opinionated.
Yeah.
They're not afraid. And that's, but the other thing, I was talking with Ted about this a little earlier too, is, another one of Red's rules was that if you criticize somebody, you write a negative column about somebody, you better be at practice the next day. Don't hit and run.
Yeah.
And
don't be a
lot of these guys that are very, very opinionated and take very often are real cheap shots and uncalled for shots at athletes or coaches or whatever, never see these guys face to face.
Yeah.
So it's a different thing for myself. If I'm criticizing somebody or writing about somebody, I see these guys every day in the locker room. And I know when Chantal Maccabi took over as the Canadians with their media relations person, she's been trying to explain to the players the difference between the regular beat guys who are there every day and these other guys. and that if there's something that we write or something that they don't like, they can come to us and explain and have. I remember Max Pacioretty being really upset at me about something I had written, and approached me about it, and we talked about it and settled our differences or whatever. I gave him my side of the story, he gave me his side of the story, and we got along great after that.
Yeah.
But it's there's just so much out there on the social media on these guys. People forget a lot of times these guys are also humans. You look at Jonathan Drouin, what he went through when he played here.
Yeah.
Now he's got career highs in Colorado.
Yeah.
Just some guys are built to handle it and other guys can't. And just the way their personalities are made up, the way their temperaments are made up, the pressure of playing in Montreal really got to Jonathan Drouin. We saw it on the ice. We saw it off the ice. He's away from that now. He's thriving in Colorado, playing with his old buddy Nathan McKinnon. Some guys can handle it. I talked with Mike Matheson about this, and Mike Matheson does not look at social media, does not read social media. He hears some stuff from his parents or somebody.
Here, right?
He's from here, yeah.
West Island.
West Island, yeah. He's from Point Claire. So he grew up knowing a bit about what goes on in the environment here, and he's tried to tell some of the younger players, like, don't read. If you can't handle it, don't read it.
Well, I assume players must consume media differently because media is so different now with digital media and social media.
Yeah,
they must consume it differently as opposed to back in the day. The guys would read the paper and maybe watch the 6 o'clock sports.
Yeah, you had to wait till the morning, and you picked up and you read what Red Fisher
or listen to whatever Mitch Melnick or whomever
exactly,
had to say
or Ted Teevan at night or whatever it would have been. That's it. Whereas now it's in their phone, right? I mean,
well, one of my favorite stories from my career was, having an opportunity to sit with Guy Lafleur one day when I think I was at Chaume, and had an interview. And I'll never forget this because it was such an eye opener about playing in Montreal. I asked him about what did he like the most about being a New York Ranger, and he said, I got to do my grocery.
Yeah. Well, remember Carey Price saying that. You didn't like going out even to groceries.
Yeah,
you'd be hounded everywhere you went.
Yeah, you can't go anywhere.
And it's not only can you not go anywhere, everybody's got a camera in their pocket, right? Yeah. I mean, I remember the old days, I was single back in the 90s. You had Chelios and Corson and Nyland, and I shouldn't say Nyland, he hates being called Nyland, Chris Nyland or Knuckles.
Yeah.
And you'd see these guys downtown all the time. And they'd be partying and they'd be having a good time. Yeah. I remember the old Kojak's bar on St. Catherine Street where everybody went at 3:30 in the morning to get their Suwakis. I went in there one night and I think it was Chelios and Corson and maybe Knuckles and maybe Swoboda. They were behind the counter serving the burgers. And they had a few refreshments, right? But back in the day, we all laughed at it and thought it was so cool. Today it would be click. It would be all over social media. It would be this big scandal. These Canadians guys were out drunk and serving Kojak's burgers at 3:30. Back in the day, we thought it was fun. It
was the way everybody lived. And the only exception I can think of that is, I don't know if it's true, but the story is that Chelios became a Blackhawk because of one of those evenings out.
It made, and Guy Carbonell got traded because he gave the finger to a Journal Memorial photographer on a golf course.
Management, they didn't like a lot of that stuff.
No, they didn't. And now I feel it's hard to feel sorry for guys making millions of dollars, but they really you never see, not that I'm downtown that much anymore, but you never see Habs plays. I used to hang out at Deja Vu on Bishop Street when I was there, and you'd see the Habs play. I remember watching a game on TV. I was probably working that night, and the Canes were playing in Hartford, I think, and finished my shift or whatever, and I went down. It was maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. I go down to have a beer at Deja Vu, and 10 minutes later, in walks Carbonneau and a few of the Habs. Yep. They obviously got off the plane in Dorval, headed right down to Bishop Street, and went and had a couple of beers. It was a normal thing, but these guys now, they really can't do it because they're so everybody's gonna be taking. And then if you lose the next day, they lost because the guys were in a bar last night.
Can you imagine being Caulfield and trying to go out at night? In this day and age, it
was Réjean Tremblay wrote something about him recently. How Caulfield was somewhere drunk one night during the All-Star week, and it was ridiculous. He's 23 years old. They were on a bye week. Good for him if he was out drunk in a bar and having a good time. I know if I was his age and I was playing for the Canadiens, that's what I would have been doing.
If you had given me $5 million a year when I was 23, the trouble that would have ensued.
But that's just an example about it's people. Everybody's got a phone in their pocket.
And the other thing,
it used to be word of mouth. It'd be like, I saw Chris Chelios drunk at the Dish. But now it's, you want to see a picture of.
Yeah, and the other thing I can't stand now is, and it makes it hard to follow along on any social media account, is, everybody now is everyone's a general manager. Everybody's talking about a 14-year-old kid that plays hockey in St. Catharines, and if the Habs, trade this guy and move that draft pick, shut up.
Exactly.
There's that, and there's also he shouldn't be. He's playing the wrong side.
Everybody, I think it always was that way, but everybody didn't have a platform to.
Well, you do it at the tavern.
Exactly, you do it at the tavern over a beer. Now you do it on social media.
Yeah, it drives me nuts.
I mean, I get people all the time like, who should the Canadians draft this year? I don't know. I cover the Canadians. I don't watch 1,000 junior hockey games a year. Like I'll see some of these guys at the World Juniors or whatever, but I don't. I don't have an opinion on some of these kids coming up that's enough to say who they. I mean, I know what I read from guys who do cover junior hockey, but that's my job to cover the Canadians.
If you could coach, you would be coaching.
Sometimes a funny moment comes from social media, though, and when before Kent Hughes drafted Slavkovsky in the first round when the Canadians had 2023 or
2022, yeah.
And Kent Hughes tweeted out, just for the record, we will not be using the first overall pick on what's his son's name?
Is it Jack? He's got a couple of sons. Yeah, it's Jack,
and the kid tweets back, terrible decision. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but it was really
Family's
funny.
got a sense of humor, apparently.
It was very funny.
Ken has a sense of humor, and again, since Chantal Maccabi took over, she's been trying to get the players to show more of their personalities. Yeah. Like for years, the players were beaten into this. Don't say anything, speak in cliches. Don't say anything that might be negative. Don't hide who you are. And as Chantal said, she grew up as a Canadiens fan because she loved Guy Lafleur. Yeah. She used to hang out outside the Forum waiting for him. She has 55 Guy Lafleur autographs. And she said, I want the fans to love the players the way I love Guy Lafleur. And they can't do that if they don't know them. So if you look on the Habs Twitter account now, you'll see Cole Caulfield joking around. You'll see these guys around. And it's noticeable in the locker room.
Who are the guys in the locker room who are the live wires?
Slavkovsky is hilarious.
I get that impression, yeah.
Slavkovsky could be a Seinfeld character playing for the Canadians. He'd be like the Kramer playing for the he's just, and I mean that in a nice way. He's got the eye. He's
got a twinkle in his eye. He's really got a twinkle in his eye.
You know what's nice to see about him? When the Canadians drafted him, Kent Hughes said they didn't draft him just because of his hockey ability. They drafted him because they thought he could handle everything that comes with playing in Montreal, as we were talking about earlier with Jonathan Drouin, who couldn't. Yeah. It's not a knock on Jonathan Drouin. No. People are wired differently. Some people are more sensitive. Some people aren't. Some people let things bother them more. But he's having a good, he's just turned 20.
He's enjoying himself.
He's loving every day of his life. Yeah. And so is Cole Caulfield. And they should.
Yes.
They should. They're too young to realize how fortunate they are right now, but they're very fortunate. And Slavkovsky is funny. I mean, he was talking about he had his first hat trick. And somebody said, do you remember having another hat trick? He said, well, I remember I had one when I was a kid, and the only person who threw a hat on the ice was my dad. He has a really good sense of humor. He's funny, and he's not afraid to. He's not thinking in the back of his head, oh, should I say that? Shouldn't I say that? He doesn't have a filter. And I hope they don't put one on him, and I don't think they will.
What's his upside as a player, Stu?
Well, you were talking about, I'm a pretty big guy.
Yeah.
And the day before the draft, when they had all the prospects in old Montreal, and I was standing waiting for Slavkovsky to come out, they had a chair, and he walked by me, and he's a lot bigger than me. He's maybe an inch taller, and I'm like 220, 225. He's about
235.
235, but he's 18. You were mentioning, when I was his age, I was built like Peter Svoboda.
Yeah.
I was 170 pounds. I was like, this is a man-child.
Yeah.
And that was my first impression of him. And then he was also in that interview. He was funny, and he was seemed like a really good kid. But then watching him play, I wrote a column earlier this season, he should be in Laval. He's not ready for the NHL. The Canadians he just looked lost in his own end. He didn't look earlier this season, right at the beginning of the season. And people were dumping him. You don't like it? I loved it. He's a great kid, but he just didn't look like he was ready. But to Martin St. Louis' credit and the Canadians development people, they believed the best thing for him was to stay here. And Marty St. Louis has said he's a sponge. And he said, I'm not throwing the whole book at him at once. We're page by page. We're teaching him this. Then we'll move on and teach him this. Then we'll move on and teach him this. And now we're seeing all those lessons that he's learned and been willing to learn all coming together. And what a package he's turned out to be.
Confidence must be a big part of that,
course,
too,
without a doubt. He's a confident kid. And he gets angry at himself when he makes a mistake.
Oh, he's young.
But he gets over it. And a lot of and he's allowed to get over it. Because the Canadians ruined, in my opinion, so many of their young prospects over the years. You make one mistake, you're benched, you're back to Laval or Fredericton or wherever the farm team is. They stripped away the confidence of so many young players. Whereas now, Kevin Biex had a story on Hockey Night in Canada recently. He reported that Suzuki went to Martin St. Louis in November when Slafkovsky was struggling and said, put him on my line. I can work with this kid. Nice. And the coach listened to him. Wow. And I asked Marty if that happened. He said, I don't remember him coming in my office and saying that, but we have lots of conversations about different things, and that probably did come up at some time. And so they've allowed him to make mistakes. And that's how you learn.
Really, really glad to hear that story about Chantal Maccabi, because if there's one thing that drives me out of my mind is they put a microphone in front of a hockey player and he said, the boys really gave 110% tonight, and the guys all really came together, and that's what we've been striving for because we got our it's the same shit all the time. Yeah. And to your point, Stu, you never think, oh, I like that player.
Yeah. It's to their defense, sometimes it's the questions that these guys get lead to a cliche answer.
That's on the interview too.
Yeah, that's on the interview. Well, I remember watching a Hockey Night in Canada game when Mark Crawford was coaching the Canucks. Excuse me, I can't remember who the reporter was, but the Canucks had blown a 3-goal lead in the third period or something like that. And the first question from the TV interview was, well, coach, you must be disappointed with your team's third period. And Mark Crawford on Hockey Night in Canada went, no shit. Well, I almost fell off my couch.
That's like the Tommy Lasorda thing. What did I think of Kingman's performance?
And then there was another one when Barry Bonds was playing, was on the route to breaking the home run record. And they were at the Big O, and Barry Bonds, being Barry Bonds, made the whole media wait for about an hour after the game before he finally came out to take questions. And he came out, and the first question, so Barry, how does it feel to have hit 2 home runs tonight? And he looked and he says, you guys waited an hour to ask me that? Yeah. And he turned and he walked out. Yeah, so a lot of the cliche answers come from cliche questions.
And I find now, especially on television, they don't even ask questions. And that "how do you feel" business drives me up it drives me out of my mind.
Talk to me about the game.
Talk to me about such and such.
We have to say hi to Sugar Sammy.
Talk to me about Sugar Sammy.
Please, I will. I will talk about Sugar Sammy. Stu, you may be surprised to know that Sugar Sammy sponsors the podcast.
All right.
How about that?
All right.
Sugar Sammy is a supporter of Standing By, and I was just so excited. Sammy and I have become friends over the years. Ted's told the story before. We met him when he was a very, very young man, just starting out, taking the bus to his gigs. Yep. And then Sammy and I became neighbors at one point, and we've gotten to know each other very, very well. He's from the point of taking the bus down to the gig at the Comedy Nest to where he is now is just unbelievable.
Prime Minister of India. No, he's not. What? Back to you.
Thank you. It's hell of a partnership.
Yeah.
Back to you. Sammy is currently on tour in the
Sorry, Sammy.
He's not the Prime Minister of, he's the Prime Minister of comedy, maybe.
He is that, yeah.
He's a funny man.
Yeah, he's a very funny man. Have you seen him, Stu?
Yes, I have. He's a funny guy.
Have you seen him a couple of times? Have you gone to?
No, I haven't seen him a couple of times. I've seen him once.
You gone to the bilingual show?
Not yet, no.
Not yet. You got to go. You got to go. And if you want to go, I'm telling you, listen.
Buy tickets now.
Buy tickets now, because he sold out every ticket he put on sale in 2023. And he put on 2024. He put those tickets on sale before 2024 started, and all the way to September, it's sold out. So he's added new dates. You're thinking about going, you have to go to sugarsammy.com and get your tickets now. Like I said, he's currently on tour in the United States. He's got work to do in France, where he's become a very big star in France. He's taken that bilingual show across the country. I saw him do it in Vancouver. He did it in Calgary and Edmonton. It's one of the most talented people you'll ever see on stage. And it's a special thing if you're a Quebecer to see this show. I'm telling you, as Sammy says, no one is spared. And follow him along on social media. He's just terrific. He runs clips from his show. Right now, he's in clubs across the United States as he builds his audience there. And on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, on TikTok, you'll find the clips where he's sparring with the audience. And you look at these clips and you'll buy tickets immediately. I'm telling you. The website is sugarsammy.com.
Stu, I want to ask you something because you've been covering the Canadians for over 30 years now. And I brought this up when I was co-hosting the morning show on TSN 690, and I was mocked and ridiculed and shouted down as if I had suggested that, I don't know, as if I had suggested I don't know what. I think that the Canadians would do right by Saku Koivu to retire number 11 in his honor. And let me tell you why. Second longest serving captain in franchise history after Jean Beliveau. Very more than respectable career as a hockey player in terms of length of service, statistics, and to me, what pushes it over the top is what he brought to the city, what he delivered as a human being when he went through his illness. The two most memorable moments to me at the Bell Center were the first time he came back in street clothes from cancer treatment, and then when he came back to play from cancer treatment. Those were the two most powerful, emotionally powerful moments that I've seen in that arena. And I think that makes a strong case between what he contributed as a player and what he contributed to the community. I think there's a very strong case for retiring his number. And every time I bring that up, people go, "Oh, you want to retire his number because he got sick?"
You know, if Saku Koivu played for any other team in the NHL, it would be a slam dunk to retire his number. But the standard the Canadians have set for retired numbers, Toe Blake's number is not retired. Jacques Lemaire's number is not retired. Steve Shutt's number is not retired. Yeah. The Canadians used to have, I've heard they had a thing, if you didn't win an individual award, they weren't even going to talk about your number retired, or if you're not in the Hall of Fame either. So Saku Koivu, I don't think he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I don't think he won an individual award, but I understand exactly what you're saying. And I think for any other team in the NHL, it's a slam dunk. But the Canadians, it's the standard from those glory days, excuse me, was set so high. So do you retire Saku Koivu's number before Toe Blake's? Do you retire Saku Koivu's number before
Toe Blake wore? Was it 6?
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, he was a Hall of Famer as a player and as a coach. And, excuse me. And,
so why was his number not retired?
He didn't win any individual awards, I don't believe, apart from Stanley Cup. So I think that was part of what the Canadians' standard was. But you wonder if there's maybe another way apart from the retired numbers. So they're going to have this moving forward too. Carey Price is another one.
Well, they did have. I think they honored Koivu. They had a Saku Koivu night. They honored.
They did honor him.
And I accept your answer because you delivered it with credibility and gravitas, and you actually had.
Would I love to see Saku Koivu's number retired? Yes, but do I think it will or should be retired when you judge the standards that were set before? Probably not, unless they get to some of these other players first. I mean, Steve Shutt, 60 goals in a season. Jacques Lemaire with all the cups he won.
Shutt in the Hall of Fame?
Yep.
Lemaire?
We don't realize how spoiled we are.
We were. I mean,
because
I do realize how spoiled we are. I just thought.
Hang on, I want to make a point. You go to the Rogers Center, and you look up, and you see Harold Schneps and Orland Kirkenbach.
Exactly.
As a Montrealer going to the Rogers Center, I'd look up and I go, Harold Schneps,
yes.
Really?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, and Ted, we talked about this earlier too. It's like, it's today, like, when you're saying you were shouted down, and that's today's world, right? On social media and that. People can't.
Oh, this happened in the studio with Sean Starr and Elliot Price. Yeah, they were yelling at me. What's wrong with you?
Did you need a safe space?
I did need a safe space.
The thing is, it's funny because people can't seem to have different opinions without getting into an argument. I mean, I say we have a different opinion on this here. I respect your opinion of why I can see, and to me, I don't think he is at the standard of what the Canadians players who were retired. And that's no knock on Saku Koivu.
They made the same point that you made, but they made it in a very condescending way.
Okay.
It's like, you don't know what you're talking about, and you're talking about the Montreal Canadiens.
I mean, if Saku Koivu played for the Ottawa Senators or New York Islanders or whatever, it's a slam dunk. He was a captain for a long time. Everything he went through he's definitely number retired. But and I said they're going to go through the same. Is Carey Price going to get his number retired? He might have a better chance than Saku because of that year he won all the individual awards.
Right,
I want to talk.
Surely they're going to retire Carey Price's number.
You would think so, but then again, they have these other guys. Like, to me, at the top of the list, if they're going to retire somebody else's number, it would be Toe Blake would be the first guy.
Yeah.
For me, and then probably Steve Shutt.
I want to talk to you.
But there's so many, they're going to run out of numbers.
Yeah.
That's when Mike Matheson came here and he wore number 8. And I sort of asked him why number 8. He said, well, I like single numbers. There's not many left.
Yeah,
that might be the only one.
I'm a big Dick Duff fan.
Yeah.
Alfie Turcotte.
Alfie Turcotte, yeah.
I want to ask you, Stu, for anybody who's listening.
David Maley.
David Manley. The Kostitsyn brothers. A double ceremony.
For people who are listening, I want to ask you what it's like. Larry Robinson, years and years and years ago, we were doing a broadcast at the Forum, and Larry Robinson said we were doing a morning show in the lobby of the Montreal Forum. Don't even ask me how we got
Probably
permission.
blood donor clinic or something.
Well, no, it was Corey Hart came, and it was a blood donor. Anyway, doesn't matter. Larry was hurt. He was Canadians were on the road. That's how we got permission. And he came out to see me and Patty to see what was going on. And I hadn't been in the media very long, and I was like, "Geez, Larry, what's here? Well, this is so cool." And then he came over after we were done. He said, "You want to see the dressing room?" And honest to God, I nearly shit myself. I think I blurted out, "Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah. It would be nice to see the dressing room." And when he pushed the door open, when I think about it now, it actually puts a lump in my throat. I don't know if that's because I'm a Montrealer or whatever. But how can you describe for people who don't know it? And do you think about it when you're in the Canadiens dressing room? Even today?
I have to remind myself from time to time just how fortunate I am to do the job I do. I mean, it's a wonderful job. It's a dream job for me. Like any job, there's parts of it that, you work every Saturday night. When you're traveling, you're on the road a lot and that. But yeah, there are times it's still, especially like at the Bell Center now, after every game, we wait outside the media, and it's like these elevator doors that open, right? And you walk in, and on the right-hand side is a picture of Guy Lafleur. And you walk in there, and it's special. And there's times that I have to admit, there's times it's another game, but there are times I make a point of just taking a second and just appreciating how fortunate I am to do the job I do, and also just the environment I'm in. Yeah. Like walking through the press box at the Bell Center. I remember the first game I ever covered at the Forum, like walking in that press box at the Forum, like as somebody who grew up watching games there and thinking, wow, I was sitting like 2 chairs over from Red Fisher. I'm like, wow, am I dreaming? Is this really, really happening?
Do you remember the first time you walked into the dressing room?
The first time I would have walked into a dressing room would have been the visitors' room, because at that point when I first got sent, I was covering the visiting team. So I think the first interview I ever did was, I think, Steve Yzerman in the Detroit Red Wings locker room. Because Red had the Canadiens locker room. But I remember being in the Canadiens locker room in the Forum. During the 93 Stanley Cup final, during the run, I covered some of the games, and they were doing a bunch of stories in the game, so I was in the room too. And a real funny story, we talked about Red and the respect that he commanded. The Canadiens locker room at the Forum was much smaller than the one they have now, obviously. And John LeClair, remember that 93 Cup run, was a young guy. And we walk in the room, and the players didn't have a lot of room really for their stuff. And LeClair was there, and he had his equipment around, and Red just walked up to him and he tapped him. Went like this, like, move your equipment so I can sit. So here's John LeClair grabbing all his equipment and putting it in the bag.
Yes, sir, Mr. Fisher.
So Red could sit down beside him and do the interview.
Fantastic.
I mean, it just shows the respect that Red had. And we're talking about cliches. Another great Red story is Mark Recchi were in the room, and he was asking Mark Recchi some questions, and Recchi was giving him cliche answers. And Recchi had one skate on, one skate off. And Red just turned around and started walking out. Had enough of it. And Mark Ray, Red, what's wrong, Red? What's wrong, Red? And he's walking one skate on, one skate off behind. What's wrong, Red? If you're just going to speak to me in cliches, you can basically fuck off or whatever. And I think they played the Rangers that night, and the Canadiens beat the Rangers. And he says, well, Red, what do you want me to say? Why don't you just say the Rangers sucked? He says, I can't say that. Well, you'll be saying that in the paper tomorrow. And he didn't write it, but it was just That's the way.
That's a very good imitation.
It was just
just
the way. And the other one last one was I didn't see this one, but I heard the story. Red was in the locker room with the Forum, and him and Scotty Bowman got into it over something. And at the end of it, Red said, "Fuck off, Scotty," and he turned and he walked out. And again, behind one skate off, Peter Mahovlich this time. Red. What do you want? On behalf of the Montreal Canadiens, thank you.
That's great.
Because they couldn't say that to Scotty, but Red could. So on behalf of the Montreal Canadiens, thank you.
I want you to tell your baseball interview story, because I want to hear from Stu if he's had anything similar.
Which one?
The handshake.
Marty York,
No, not Marty York.
Rod Carew.
It was the Pinky story.
That's Marty York.
Is that Marty York?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Remember Marty York from the Globe and Mail? So Marty York, this is, geez, I still lived in Toronto at this point. So this is early 80s, and I'm covering the Blue Jays. And I go down into the dressing room. Cliff Johnson. Remember Cliff Johnson, big designated hitter? And so after the game, the reporters all go into the dressing room, and Cliff Johnson is standing there, and he's holding a beer standing in front of his locker. And Marty York walks over and sticks his hand out and goes, Cliff, Marty York, Globe and Mail. And Cliff Johnson, with his still holding his beer, sticks his pinky out like this. Instead of sticking his hand out to shake it, he just sticks out his pinky. And Marty York hesitates and then takes his pinky and shakes his pinky.
Baseball players apparently are the toughest, but and you don't have to name names, Stu, but have you had a similar experience with arrogance like that?
Not really. I didn't cover the Expos, but I've heard stories, and I know one of the reasons American writers love hockey players or covering hockey is because the players are so different than what they are in MLB. But I've never really. I mean,
it's good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, Carey Price could be blunt at times or prickly with dealing with the media, and Shea Weber too. Shea just didn't have any use for the media. He didn't really want to talk to anybody.
But it comes with the territory, Shea. It's part of the job.
Well, that's the one thing. That's the one thing he didn't. Shea Weber was a great leader in the locker room. The players loved him. But at the time, I wrote a column saying that Brendan Gallagher should have been captain over Shea Weber, because Shea doesn't want to do all the stuff that we see Nick Suzuki doing now as captain, right? We see Nick Suzuki talking in schools. We see Nick Suzuki dealing on the media all the time. We see him doing all this. And I don't think Shea really realized or cared to realize the difference between being captain in Nashville and being captain in Montreal. Yeah. And there's a huge difference in both.
How could players not know that?
Or just not want to? I mean,
no. But to your point, maybe he didn't. But I don't understand. If you're a player in the National Hockey League, like if you're a baseball player, you know the New York Yankees and the history of the Yankees and the Red Sox, and I don't understand. Like if you get traded to Montreal, for the love of Christ, you must know what you're walking into and the tradition and the all of that stuff. And I'm with Ted. I have no sympathy for you. If you're a public figure, that comes with the territory. Man up.
You got to realize though, Shea Weber didn't want to come to Montreal, right? Piquet didn't want to leave Montreal, and Shea Weber didn't want to come here. It was a trade that both guys went. And I mean, I'm not trying to knock Shea Weber. It's just his personality he did his thing. Yeah. And we're talking about players reading social media. He's the only guy I 100% believe does not read anything. Yeah. Written. He couldn't care less. He's his own man. He does his own thing. Couldn't care less about the media. Couldn't care less. He's a leader in the locker room. The players all loved him. Yeah,
and
he's a great captain with an amazing.
A vocal leader or leader by example?
Both, I think.
Yeah, I remember
it was Nick Suzuki. I think it was Suzuki telling me, when he was a rookie and Weber having him over to his house for a barbecue, and like he was a good man, like a great leader in the locker room, a great leader, really respected, played well, good person. He just didn't have any interest in the other stuff. And didn't try to hide the fact he didn't have interest in it. And that's, a lot of people criticize Max Pacioretty. They said he wasn't a good captain. Max Pacioretty, if he scored 4 goals or if he was -8, he was there every game to answer questions.
Him everywhere.
And you saw him around town. You saw him walk around.
He was
embraced,
nice to everybody.
He embraced Shea Weber as a personality and a person. Shea Weber was better built to be a captain of a team or a leader of men, right? Max Pacioretty, it was more difficult for him. Like he had Max Pacioretty, I was mentioning earlier, him and I had a disagreement at one point. His skin was thin. Like he read everything. He heard everything that was going on. He let it affect him. He couldn't, we were saying different players act differently. But he embraced wearing the C, and he understood what it meant to be captain of the Montreal Canadiens.
That's what he felt the pressure because he understood how important it was. And he tried to live up to it.
Yeah, and what he got mad at me about was at a Michel Therrien golf tournament, and he arrived with Shea Weber. And I had asked him a question at the time, did you give any thought to maybe giving the captaincy to Shea Weber? Because Weber had just won the Marc Messier Leadership Award at the year before. And he was, Pacioretty was upset about that. And good for him.
He was offended by the question?
He thought it was sort of a loaded question. He didn't like that it was done in a scrum, but we could never get one-on-one interviews with guys back then, so it was the only sort of opportunity. But when we talked about it and we hashed it out, like I respected why he was upset because he took pride. And I give him my side of the story. I wasn't saying you're like, I just thought, Shea Weber just got here. He was a captain in Nashville. Maybe it'd be easier for you if you didn't have the C. You'd have left pride. You wouldn't have to deal with us. Or you wouldn't have to deal with me every day. And he was like, I want to be, and I admired him for that. I really admired him. The fact
were
that
you able to bury the hatchet?
Yeah. So I said, look, I said, I asked you a question that I think everybody at that day was thinking. I was the one who actually asked it out loud, and he didn't like that it was asked. He thought it was demeaning towards him or insulting him as a captain, and I explained to him I wasn't. I just thought maybe it would be good for you, might help your game if you didn't have that weight. And it's not like you're giving it to Joe Blow. It's Shea Weber who was just named the leadership. But and after that, Max and I got along fine. I respected him. I hope he respected the answers I gave him, in my opinion, why I asked him the question and why I thought that, and we moved on. And it's
pro.
Yeah, pro.
Yeah.
And as I say, when people criticize Max Pacioretty as a captain, I'll defend him because he, as I said, leading didn't come naturally to him. I don't think he had to work at it, whereas I think it came more naturally to Shea Weber. Shea Weber couldn't care less what I wrote or you said. He couldn't care less what anybody
Sounds
thinks.
like Weber would have been perfect in the Army,
Yes.
where you didn't have
exactly.
to be a personality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when they first made that trade, I called Adam Vignon, who was a guy covering the Predators at the time for the Nashville Tennessean, just to find out. I said, what do you think of the trade, and what do you think about Shea Weber? And he said, boy, he says, it's going to be interesting to see how he handles the media there. He said he hates talking with the media. He said, if you want to talk to him about his fantasy baseball team or football team or anything else, he'll talk all day, but he doesn't want to talk about himself. He hates doing the media. And so he was like that before he got here. It's not like he came here and said, so, I have the utmost respect for Shea Weber as a person and a player. He was a captain of that team that made it unlikely run to the Stanley Cup final. But I think he just didn't care to embrace what it means to be captain of the Canadiens. And it's a lot more than what you do just in the locker room. And it's refreshing to see Nick Suzuki coming in as a young captain and he reminds me, we were talking about Saku Koivu, he reminds me a lot of Saku Koivu as a captain.
Yeah.
Saku had an imprint in the community too.
Yeah,
right?
it's interesting what you were saying about Shea Weber, and it triggered a memory. At the end of that unexpected run to the Stanley Cup final, what is it, 3 seasons ago now?
21, yeah.
Yeah. I remember at the end of the game, after they had lost, all the players made a beeline to Shea Weber.
They loved and respected him.
All the players made, because I guess they must have known.
Well, they
that
knew
was
he
it,
was
eh?
playing like he was playing on like he was beaten up. You're talking about like in the Army, he was like a wounded soldier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
playing through all that, and I admire and respect him so much for that. But then the next season on opening night, Weber didn't show up. He wasn't there when he would have got I imagine the ovation he would have got. Remember what Carey Price got? Yeah. And then after Guy Lafleur passed away, the first game out that he wasn't there, even though he wasn't playing with the team. And then he did show up when the equipment Gervais, his final game for that. And there was some boos from the Bell Center crowd when he came out because I think fans were upset. Like he never held a farewell news conference. But that's Shea Weber. He couldn't care less. He's his own man. He does his own thing. As I said, he's a good person, a good leader of men, but he just didn't want anything to do with the spotlight. And I guess there's a part of that that's admirable, right? He wasn't looking for, but as captain of the Canadiens, as captain of the Canadiens,
that comes with a responsibility.
And that's why I thought Brendan Gallagher would have made a better captain at that time, and I wrote it than Shea Weber just because Brendan Gallagher. I remember interviewing Brendan Gallagher one time, and he's always been great with the media. And there was a few years ago, and they were in another slump. They had lost I don't know how many games in a row. And Brendan did a scrum with all the guys for 15 minutes or something. And then he did a couple little one-on-ones. And I had a few questions I wanted to ask him that I didn't want everybody else to get the answer. So at the end I said, Brendan, do you have like maybe 5 more minutes for me? Yeah, no problem. So I asked the questions. And at the end I said to him, I don't know if anybody's ever thanked you for this, but I just want to thank you for always making yourself available. Good times, bad times, talking, taking all the questions, helping me do my job better. And he gave me a great answer. And it was like, he said, I understand that we speak to the fans through you guys. And if we don't show that we care and we don't talk about how we're trying and what we're doing, we don't get that message through to them. Yeah. So he understood what dealing with the media meant as far as fans follow the team through the media.
And
right?
that's the other part of it, Stu, I think, is, as a hockey player. It's the fans that are buying the $600 seats, and not that you owe them anything, but I think you kind of do owe.
Yeah.
You have to understand. I don't have any respect for like actors who were like, I want a private life, and you can't take my picture. Well, you know what? You should have been a plumber. And then no one would take your picture.
And you wouldn't make $5 million
and
a
you
year.
would make $5 million
Or
a year.
Bob Dylan never talking to the crowd.
Yeah.
At his
And
concerts.
I loved Shea Weber as a player. I loved watching him play. I loved watching him shoot the puck. And I thought it was a great trade. I know that's a lot of people don't think so, but I thought it was a great trade. But I really had a hard time with that part of it because I think, as you point out, it comes with a little bit of a responsibility. Yeah. And even if you come in from Nashville, you have to understand the history of the place where you're going, et cetera, et cetera. That's just my opinion. We got to quickly, Ted, we have to say hi to our other friends.
We do. We have other friends. Hello, friends. Our friends at Merson Automotive. Kara Merson and her husband Celso, who are the third-generation owners-operators of Merson Auto, and it's that time of the year where you want to be putting the summer tires on the car and taking the winter tires off the car. If you need new summer tires, Merson will take care of you. They've got all cars for all tires and all budgets. I think Yokohama is their that's their bread and butter tire.
If you
that's
look
a good tire.
You look at the side wall, big Yokohama. What do you call those things?
Billboards.
Billboard. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. But they have all brands. Whatever you want, whatever you need. The Mersons will fix you up. And if you don't need new tires, they'll tell you that too. They'll look at your tires and go, "No, you're good for another season," and give you a little bit of lead time to save up money. That's part of what we like about Merson. They never sell you anything or do any kind of a service on your car that you don't need. They're not going to hose you.
Nope.
Merson. We don't hose you.
There's the new slogan.
Yeah.
They don't have corn tires, by the way.
They don't have corn tires, no. Although I have always thought that corn tires would be good in the winter because with the niblets, you'd get good traction with the niblets. I just don't know how you'd hold them together. That's all I.
You're a marketing genius.
Yeah. I just got to figure out how they're going to adhere to each other because you can't just strap a whole bunch of cobs onto the wheel of your car. That's not going to work. I'm sure the Mersons appreciate this commercial.
Yeah, they're probably loving it.
Yeah. Go see the Mersons. Don't ask them about corn tires.
No.
They'll just say, "Are they still doing that bit? Are they still doing the corn tire bit? Tell him to shut up."
Tell them those two idiots sent you.
They're on Saint Jacques, just west of Cavendish. And by the way, not only do they do tires, they'll do anything mechanically for your car, be it internal combustion engine, hybrid, or electric. Their mechanics are trained in all of the above. Mersons will take care of you. MersonAuto.com.
We have new friends on the podcast again. Well, they're not, not new friends. They sponsored our last season, and they're back. Our good friends at Accutech Electric. Tom and his family run this family business and have been doing it since 1995. When you think of electrical, I want you to think of Accutech Electric, ACUTECH.ca. Tom's dad started the company all those years ago. Tom is a master electrician who's now running the company and has a set of values that's important to him, not only with his customers, but with his employees. And you'll see that reflected when you talk to them.
They're like the Mersons if the Mersons were electricians.
That's exactly
Seriously,
right.
It's the same kind
a garage that doesn't try to hose you.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for, whether it's indoor and residential or it's outdoor or it's commercial. You've got an architect designing a new house for you. They can handle all of these big jobs. They can also go to your grandmother's 70-year-old house and redo that for you too. Because as Ted and I like to say, don't call Uncle Pete. Leave it to the experts. When it comes to electricity, you don't want an avid hobbyist. You want somebody who knows what they're doing. And the folks at Accutech Electric know what they're doing. We're thrilled to have them aboard again for the 7th season of the Standing By podcast. Accutech is ACUTECH, Accutech.ca. Stu, I already know the answer to this question, but I have to ask you anyway. Favorite city to go to when you're covering the Habs?
Nashville.
Yeah.
I
Why?
love Nashville.
Is that because you're a country music fan, or is there more to it than that?
There's more to it than that. It's just Broadway Street. It's like Crescent Street used to be years ago.
Yeah.
It's about the same length if
Yeah.
you went from de Maisonneuve down to René Lévesque, maybe a little longer. Bar, live music from 11 in the morning till 3 in the morning every day. The fact that I'm at country music.
Talent out the yin yang.
The talent,
too,
you see singers.
eh?
You know, my wife likes watching American Idol. And I watch it with her, and they have a couple of country guys on this season really good. And I told her, you'll see 5 guys like that every night on Broadway Street in Nashville.
Every block almost.
Every
that's
bar you
what
go
I'm
into,
told.
it's just it's so much fun. It's such a cool city, and it's great because the arena's right at the end of the strip. So
Nice.
I tell my friends, if you want to do a road trip to watch a Canadiens game, you can start at one end and hit all the bars and the honky tonks, and the arena's at the end. And then on the way back, you can do the reverse going back. So it's a really fun city. As you're talking about if you need to like country music. First time I ever went there was when PK got traded. I went to cover his first game. And a buddy of mine had just recently retired, and I invited him, if you want to come with me, you just need to pay your airfare. I got a hotel room. So he went. So we were sitting in Tootsie's or one of the honky tonks, and Francois Gagnon from RDS comes down the stairs. He's had a couple of beverages. He's feeling no pain.
He's a good guy, Francois.
He's a great
Yeah,
guy.
great guy.
And he comes and sits with us, and is telling us my first time in Nashville. He's, I love Nashville. I love Nashville. I said, are you a big country music? No, I hate country music, but I love Nashville. I've told people that story, and it's just a really fun place.
What about buildings, Stu? In terms of covering the game, is there a building?
Madison Square Garden's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, the Bell Center. I'm at the Bell Center all the time. But the Bell Center, like for the press box facilities and everything.
Have you been to Climate Pledge?
Yes, yes. I'm glad that you mentioned that because it is.
What
I
a
went there last year.
building that is.
And what a cool city.
Yeah.
Like when I was there, the Canadiens played in Vancouver the night before and Seattle the next night. And I got a text when I'm in the press box in Vancouver from Mitch Garber.
Of course.
Saying, you in town? I want to take you out for dinner tonight. And I said, I'm in Vancouver, but I'll be there tomorrow. Yeah. So the Canadiens didn't have a morning skate that day, so I had a chance to walk around the city a little bit and explore it a little bit. And then when I went to the rink and I got outside, I went, this can't be an arena. It looks like a community center or something. It's only like a floor above the ground or 2 floors, but they built it underground, right? They dug under, and it is so cool. They have a big window where you can. It is. That's probably the coolest arena, and the giant screens. Yeah, they have like 3 giant screens. It's you start watching the giant screen, you forget to watch the game live because it's so clear.
I'm with you. I love reading your stuff when you talk about like between periods. Between periods and the
Bell Center,
the level. I mean, I sound like Grandpa, but I was in rock radio for a long time. I love rock music, but man, I would like to talk to the guy I'm watching the game with seated next. You can't hear yourself think.
It's one of my pet peeves.
It's like people have to be constantly entertained now. I just want to watch the game.
It's one of my pet peeves, and I love music. I love Nashville. I love good loud music. But the DJs they play there, I mean, it's techno stuff or whatever, which I get, if I'll comment on, boomer, shut up, boomer, old man yelling at the clouds. But having said that, how many young people hold season tickets at the Bell Center? Not a lot, I don't think. Not a lot of young guys have. But and you're right. I mean, it's so loud. You cannot talk to the person next to you. A friend of mine had company season tickets, and he actually gave them up because he said, even in the intermission, I can't, you bring a client to the game, you're entertaining him, but you also want to talk business. He says, even in the intermission, I can't talk to him. And without screaming in his ear. So he says, I got rid of my season tickets. And he says, now I just take my clients out for dinner. I have 3 hours where I can actually talk to them.
That's the thing. I used to love to, you'd go with a buddy and you'd see this amazing play. And then after the play was over, you'd want to talk about it, break it down, or say, wow, and just talk about what you're watching. But the second
you can't do that now.
The second the whistle goes,
and even in the intermissions, you don't get a break from it. I'm the old man yelling at the clouds, and I'm there every game. But it's. I mean, obviously the Canadiens think there's a lot of fans there who enjoy it,
and I'll buy my own T-shirts.
Yeah.
I don't need your cannon.
But I guess there are fans who like it. I mean, I tweeted out, it's like, is there anybody out here who's enjoying this? The guy who seems to be having the most fun and enjoys the music the most is the DJ. They show him on the camera. And he's a guy he's not a young guy. He's jumping around, having a great old time.
Stu, I'll close with this. It's been a long time. I think we've asked every hockey-related guest we've had, Mike Farber and Dick Irvin. I think we asked this question to Pierre Hood. It's been a long time since a Canadian team won the Stanley Cup, and it's been a long time since, you and I are relatively the same age. Yeah. We got used to going to the parade on the regular route, as the old saying goes. What do you think is the issue? Is it around the corner? Or is there a Canadian Stanley Cup coming? And what do you think has been the problem all these years?
Well, my 5 years in high school, 4 Stanley Cup parades.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember I've told this story before to other people. One year I said to my buddy, we used to skip school, go to the parade. I said, "You're going to skip school, go to the parade with us tomorrow?"
Yeah.
And he says, "No." He says, "I'll go next year though." and he did. He did. That's the best part of the story. He did. The next year we went. So there's a lot involved. Winnipeg's got a really good team this year. Edmonton has a really good team. Vancouver has a good team.
They're all celebrating.
There's a chance Toronto's got a good team, but they're going out in the first or second round. I think there's a lot of things. Part of it is the tax situation in Canada. It makes it when you're competing against teams in states that have no state income tax, and you're making $12 million a year, $10 million a year. That's a much nicer place to go to. The weather's better. I've always said, hockey players, I don't think really care where they play. Their wives and families do.
Yeah.
The guy goes away on a 10-day road trip. Would your wife rather be sitting in Tampa by the pool in the backyard or sitting in Candiac watching the snowfall or Brossard or Winnipeg? Winnipeg.
Even Edmonton.
My best buddy's from Winnipeg, and he's very defensive of it. But I'm surprised anybody.
I lived there and I loved it.
Yeah.
But God help you in the winter.
But when you have a choice of 31 other places to live, and a lot of them have no state tax and sunshine, as I say, hockey players are hockey players. They live in their own little bubble, right? They go to the rink, they travel together, they're eating 5-star, but their wives and their families and they have a big say in where they play. So I think that factor, and some of it's just bad luck too.
Yeah.
It's only one team that wins the cup. There's been good Canadian teams that have gone in the playoffs before. Edmonton, you look at Edmonton and teams this year. But I think the main thing is, and plus the owners are, Canadian dollars, Canadian American dollar thing. It's definitely much more difficult. The owners of Canadian teams, their hands are tied in ways that American teams aren't. And that, I think, factors in.
They've got a lot of former first-round draft picks, young guys who were drafted in the first round. There's a lot of talent on the roster. If it were all to come together, they might. And I think all you can ask for these days is just, I enjoyed the run back in 2021. That was really exciting.
It's just too bad that everything was shut down.
But it was exciting. It reminded me of the year that they actually won back when we were kids in 70-71 when they came out of nowhere and beat Boston. I don't know if it was in the first round they beat Boston. They ended up beating Chicago in the final. But it reminded me of that. It was unexpected.
It was unexpected. It was Carey Price and Shea Weber and those guys sort of carrying them through. But the thing with this team right now, at least with Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton, they have a plan, and Marty St. Louis, they have a coach. They have a coach now who makes Montreal a place that young players, I think, want to come play because he gives them freedom to play their style. And they've made it a good place to play. It's a fun locker room to be in. A bunch of guys are all around the same age group, 22, 23, 24. They seem to enjoy playing in Montreal. They seem to have embraced the style. Arbor Jacki, Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, Caden Gooley, Jordan Harris. They're a nice group of kids, or a good group of kids. Marty St. Louis keeps saying they want everyday guys. And there's not one jerk in that locker room now. There's not one guy that you go, I don't want to talk to him. Like Yoel Army is a sort of shy, quiet guy, but he's a nice guy. There's no jerks in that locker room. I think that goes a long way when you're building a team. There's no jerks with the media. There's no jerks when they're together. I think I've said it. They're like a band of brothers. This team, and Kent Hughes needs to bring in some more talent. They're set on defense. Goaltending looks okay. Yeah. This Jacob Fowler kid coming up looks like he could be the real deal moving forward. You got Sam Montembeault. So if Kent Hughes can find a couple more forwards who can put the puck in the net, a few years down the road, the Canadians might have a chance. But just making the playoffs right now is an accomplishment in a 32-team league.
Stu Cowan has been our guest. Thanks, Stu.
My pleasure. It was great fun.
Really appreciate it.
A lot of fun. Grew up listening to you guys every morning.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Our thanks to Poseidon, our producer. Our thanks to our executive producers, Pantelis and Mike Ward. And a big thank you to the UPS Store, upsstore.ca, our title sponsor, along with Sugar Sammy, Accutech, and the good people at the Mersons. And our thanks to you for following along on social media and downloading all the episodes. Ted and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Standing by, the Terry and Ted podcast has been brought to you by the UPS Store Canada. The UPS Store near you is locally owned and operated by a member of your small business community.